camp?
Well, you're right. In fact, the cementing of relations with Libya and the United States only happened in 2009 when the American ambassador appeared there. I think that one is seeing a particularly difficult problem for the United States at the moment, because Bahrain is the headquarters of the Sixth Fleet, and they have very close connections, and they want stability in Bahrain, and they have a definite interest in in theory, in the preservation of the Libyan regime, because it's not only an oil-producing country, but it's regarded as an enemy of Islamic extremism. So it will be, all I can say, it will be most interesting to see what Hillary Clinton and the State Department statesmen come up. But I think things are going so fast and the rules are changing so fast that they're really in some kind of dilemma.
Let's talk a little bit then about that dilemma to Mr. Al-Gumati. Is there a feeling for those activists, perhaps like yourself, that you're not only struggling against the government in Libya, but also against the vested interests of foreign companies and governments who have a lot to gain from the current status quo remaining as it is?
Well, I don't see how or why there should be any conflict or paradox between Western and American economic and other interests in the region and in Libya, and the local populations aspiring to be free and to have their own representative government. I think the ex-Tunisian dictator Ben Ali and also the ex-Egyptian dictator Mubarak were also very anti-Islamic movements, and yet the Americans seem to have welcomed this popular change that took place in Tunisia and Egypt. At least that's what the rhetoric from the White House is saying, that we respect the wishes of the people if they want to change and set up a proper, genuine democratic rule. So I think that should go for Libya as well. And even if we go that route and we go all the way and we do have a much more representative, stable national government in Libya, I think it will still look to have very good, close relationships with the West, particularly with the UK and America, and have, bilateral trading and economic trading. And Libya will still need the foreign, European and American oil companies to come and explore and produce the oil. So I don't see any conflict there. I think this argument is gone. I think it's history. I think we are now in a totally different era, and I think this.
But hang on, Professor Owen raised a point which is expressed often by some in the West, and that is the fear of Islamic groups. What is the alternative to people like Gaddafi?
I think the alternative would be a broad nationalist government representative of all types of trends in Libya: nationalist, tribal, secular, Islamist. But there is no fear whatsoever that in Libya the Islamists will be the sole power dominating everything. They are not actually that powerful. Yes, they are part of society, but they are not that. And as we've seen in Egypt and Tunisia, the Islamists are being very open and very moderate and clearly stating that they don't wish to dominate power. They just wish to be part of power like everybody else, as they are representative of society like all other trends are. So I don't see any problem there. I see Libya as being able to achieve consensus and set up a good national government that is serving its population rather than oppressing its population.
That's definitely the hopes of those in opposition. Perhaps we will now go to Professor Owen. Is the concern or fear precisely because these revolutions or protests or movements for change are being driven by unknown individuals or forces, not the traditional opposition groups? You can't really put your finger on it and say those guys will bring X, Y or Z scenario if they win.
No, I think you're absolutely right. If you're looking at it from London or from Washington, they have no guidance. They don't know what is going to happen. I mean, I think the larger and more sensible view is that in Muslim countries there has to be a role for, let us call it, political Islam, and that has to be fitted in. And I think we can say that the attempts to try and destroy the political Islam in the various countries of North Africa have not succeeded. And I agree with my colleague here that this is a very good opportunity to try and bring the Islamists into the fold in a plural parliamentary system.
Let's talk a little bit with Mr. Al-Gumati about the Islamists, though. You've got the Muslim Brotherhood. They seem to have done some sort of accommodation, if not deal, with the authorities. You had the Jama'ah Islamiyah, who seem to have gone through rebellion, being squashed and then being freed. What is left of that element?
I think they are weak. I think they are not as really as strong and well entrenched in society as people make out. Remember that in the last 40 years, Gaddafi has been very brutal. He has not given these groups any chance to work openly and build their social, economic, and political networks. They have always been driven to work underground as clandestine groups, and that doesn't help them to build a really power base. So I think the fear is really highly exaggerated, and I do echo Professor Owen's sentiment that perhaps bringing these groups into a democratic system as part of society and part of political participation will be a good thing. It will make them moderate their views as well and their policies, and see that they have to work alongside everybody else on the basis of everybody is a citizen and everybody is a partner of their own country and state, and that should be the case.
All right, before we get carried away in looking at the future too much, let's go over to Professor Owen once again and talk about the present. There is a tendency, or perhaps a temptation, to try and make a parallel between what's going on in Libya and what happened in Tunisia or Egypt. But on the other hand, how similar are those scenarios, and how important is the tribal element and support of tribes in Libya?
Well, I think there is a pan-Arab aspect to all this, and people are learning from each other, but I think also we have to recognize that there are separate revolutions in different countries. They have different circumstances and very often different leaderships and different types of control. I think in the tribal countries, this, insofar as tribalism is represented in the army as it is in Libya and Sudan and Yemen, it's part of the business of the rulers managing the whole thing in order to try and fit the tribes in and bring them into the big tent. But there is also a temptation, I think we are seeing it in Yemen at the moment, of to try and use the tribes and their tribal representation in the army against the protesters and the demonstrators. So that will be one of the tests in the next weeks and so on, and see how that plays out in those countries where army and tribe are very close together.
All right, coming back to Libya though, Mr. El-Ghomati, how is it playing out in the Libyan scenario now? Can Gaddafi still count on the support of key elements of the country and power circles like the tribes?
Actually, Gaddafi comes from a very small tribe, Gaddafi tribe, from the region of Sirte. He did try to use tribalism as a political tool for manipulation and control and power. However, I think tribalism is probably stronger as a social sort of network in the eastern region than in the western region. For example, Tripoli, which is a population of 2 million, is very much an urban city. And yet, I can give you actually an example where tribals can work against the regime. Yesterday, in the town of Derna in the east, a young activist was arrested by the security police, and then his tribe's chiefs heard that he was going to be sent to Tripoli. So they all gathered outside the security center and threatened that if their son